Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Philadelphia-based jazz guitarist and composer Joshua Stamper. We had a good talk about his latest project, the 2022 album Soma Schema. This album features him straddling the jazz, classical, and experimental worlds. He gets into the construction of his 12th release as a leader, along with exploring how he survived COVID, the future ahead, and so much more. Enjoy this interview.
Yep. So, hey, thank you again, Joshua, for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah.
So, as I was mentioning before we get into the album, talk to me a little bit about how you survived COVID and how that process changed you now that, you got a new album out, the world's kind of reemerging to live music.
It certainly represented a hit income-wise, but, I think in general I probably fared better in some ways than a lot of my colleagues. A lot of the work that I do is actually composing and arranging for I have my own slew of projects, of course, but I also write a lot of music for other people. And so, that's even though recording was really pretty impossible for a good year and a half or so, I was still able to do some arranging projects for people and writing string quartet arrangements or chamber orchestra arrangements for their records, and it's just a matter of kind of getting those things front loaded for when we could actually go back into the studio. I did do a little bit of remote studio recording, which was helpful, and all teaching activities were, of course, online. But yeah, it is nice to be getting out there again and starting to play and perform, and it feels it feels good to be with people. So
for sure, yeah. Well, talk to me about the new project, Soma Schema. I mean, it's there's a lot going on here. So talk to me a little bit about how this album came about.
Yeah, so this collection of musicians, we had all worked, in various configurations for quite a while, and we, out of those collaborations, friendships really bloomed out of them, and also kind of a shared set of sensibilities musically, real love for space and freedom of movement and play, playfulness, humor, all that kind of thing, and but also all of these musicians had played a lot of my work, and so that actually was there's something about I think when a ensemble it becomes really, really familiar with a particular compositional approach, that they inhabit that music in a way that's where there's a settling into those aesthetic priorities, and so that was happening with my own work, which was a real gift. And then so out of these different all these different collaborations, I basically just said, there's so much affinity that these particular musicians share, and I approached each one and said, hey, what do you think about, actually being part of a group together, and so they were all completely on board, and then I just started writing specifically for this group, and so it's a pretty special group of musicians and friends, and they're all phenomenal players and really, really terrific human beings, and so that's kind of how it all emerged, and we did the very first session was in 2019, which was the summer of 2019, which was kind of a disaster of a session. We just had a mountain of technical difficulties in the session itself. So what that meant was that, just about, well, everything except for the drums and some bass and, a couple guitars and some keys, everything else had to be redone. It was a really frustrating experience. But, so then we, as we were kind of retracking in different situations, which kind of brought us up to the last session, I think was at the end of January of 2020. Yeah. And then I took all that unusable material and then decided to, I really, really wanted to redeem that experience of that initial session. And so I chopped up all that, unworkable, unusable material and kind of started creating these collage compositions out of all the remnants of that session, and creating new compositions out of the old stuff, and and so pitch shifting and running things backwards, and taking a solo from this song and then a drums from that song, and it ended up being really, really fun. From there, through the first part of the first month or so of the pandemic, I was mixing remotely with my mixing engineer, and then it was just kind of waiting in the wings until the right kind of situation came about to release it. So that's kind of the arc, timeline-wise.
So what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Well, I think all of my favorite music and my own experience of music is very much, it's a spatial listening experience, that there is this 3D quality to when I'm listening, and all of my favorite music, it's a very, very wide open space, where, and by space I mean a space with physical dimensions. There's front, back, left, right, up, down, and in all my favorite music, there's just this openness, and there's room to explore and room to run around and room to play, and so I guess in terms of what I hope the listener comes away with is some kind of sense of that, where there's a kind of a physicality to the experience, and and that they have room to, lots of room to look around.
And you have a lot of influences. You're going from classical to jazz, experimental. There's a lot going on. How did you arrive at that? How have you evolved to this kind of voice that you have?
Yeah, well, I think it is really just a function of being a pretty omnivorous listener. When I was in high school, I just had the really, really good fortune of having, two really phenomenal music teachers. They were always, one was, pretty steeped in the classical tradition, and one was very much coming from the jazz tradition. But they were always giving me and all of my peers the real literature to work with. It wasn't any kind of, it wasn't like classical pieces that were kind of adapted for high schoolers. It was actually the actual material, and so they really took their students seriously, and as a function of that, or as a result, I was always I felt like I was well nourished, and it was just always like consistently compelling from the go. And then that was mixed in with growing up with a dad who really loved 50s and 60s rock and roll, and then being exposed to lots of experimental music, and so I think, as with most people, all all of the things that you hear end up kind of filtering through, your own person and your own kind of set of, the things that your own set of resonances, I guess, the things that you respond to. But yeah, that's kind of, it doesn't, it's not something that I've really I haven't tried to find a voice so much as just responding to the things that make my heart beat a little faster, in what I'm listening to.
Right on. So if anyone out there wants to pick up the brand new album, where's the best place for them to go to either buy, stream, or find out about anything that you might be doing in the future?
Yeah, thanks. The best place is always Bandcamp. It's the most kind of pro artist medium that I know of that's out there, just in terms of its it treats artists well. So yeah, it's just if you go to Bandcamp and type in Joshua Stamper, it will come up, and then you'll see a collection of releases, and Soma Schema being the most recent. So, and then for future projects, I think just going to my website, which is just joshuastamper.com, and that's where you find out all the, not just the albums, but collaborations and writing and essays and things like that. So.
Hey, Joshua, thank you for opening up about the album. Good luck with it, and with the world opening up. Good luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Philadelphia, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Joshua for his time, energy, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.